Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, in yesterday's video I said I was going to do it, well, today I am. I'm currently using Nobara 41 as my main operating system on my PC and will probably be using it for the next few months before I go to something else. If all goes well, I may switch to Bazite and try that as main operating system. Anyways, here I'm happy with Glorious Eggroll's tweaks to Fedora, and things seem to be going very well. I do recommend checking this one out so far. My limited use has been pretty good. Nobara 41 we talked about yesterday, and well, it seems to be pretty good. But moving on from that, because you probably don't care about that and just want to hear the news. So first up here, we're talking about ROMM, or ROMM, or subscribe to Mr. Sujano, depending on how you want to pronounce that. Anyways, this is a self-hosted ROM manager and just got a big update. So at the time of filming, version 3.7.0 is the latest and greatest update. So they say here, new year, new release. We're excited to announce version 3.7.0, our most feature-packed release to date. And this release is pretty big. I mean, they've completely revamped their UI. On top of that, there's now support for OpenID Connect, and the homepage now has a continue playing row of games. Under notable changes, they say there's two Docker images that are now provided, normal and slim. The slim images are smaller, more lightweight versions of the normal image, while the normal image includes all of the emulator.js code and cores. There's now support for 3DS QR codes provided someone has a modified 3DS. They have experimental PSP emulation and even more. If you are curious about this one, ROM is 100% free and open source, and like everything I talk about, link will be in the description below right at the bottom. Next up, we're talking about a brand new controller of sorts for the Nintendo Wii. Yes, you heard me, the Nintendo Wii. So this is the announcement from Hyperkin, New Year, New Wii, guitars. Introducing the Hyper Strummer, an updated model of our previous Wii guitar. We have been working hard and wanted to give you a little surprise of what is to come this year. The Hyper Strummer is set for pre-orders to start now. And taking a look on Amazon, and yes, this is a real thing. It's not April Fool's. It's up for $77. And it is for the Nintendo Wii. This is not something to use on, I don't know, like Xbox or PlayStation or something like that. It is made for the Nintendo Wii. It requires a Wiimote to be plugged right into the back of this thing. And you may be wondering, what is the point of this, considering the Wii is such an old system? Well, there are a couple of points here. One, there are some die-hard Guitar Hero fans out there. And number two, what about emulation? I mean, I could be wrong here, but it appears that Dolphin is pretty excited about this one. So Dolphin's latest tweet says, "We are so ready." And I'm curious to see if this controller works out of the box with Dolphin, or if Dolphin's going to need to get updated to make it compatible. Either way here, if you're a Nintendo Wii fan, whether it's through emulation or I guess real hardware, you've got a brand new controller option. And speaking about announcements, next up here, this one was a secret to everyone. I mean, we've covered this a bunch on this channel already and it's leaked all over the place. Anyway, Steam Deck has made it official, or Valve or whoever's running the On Deck account. We're excited to share that SteamOS is expanding beyond Steam Deck with the newly announced Lenovo Legion Go S powered by SteamOS. This is the first officially licensed device to ship with our operating system, and we're continuing to add compatibility for more devices. Now, if you are curious about this one, Android Authority already has their hands on the Legion Go S powered by SteamOS and has the first takes on their website. There are some very interesting pieces of information here, like the fact that you can eject the micro SD card from a Steam Deck and just throw it in a Lenovo Legion Go S without formatting it and using the data that's on there. I think that's some pretty cool compatibility. It's probably not going to be used by a lot of people. I don't expect a lot of people to have a Steam Deck and a Go S and swap micro SD cards all the time. But either way here, it's kind of cool that it's compatible. However, the more I think about it, the more practical it could be if and when there's a wider release of SteamOS. I mean, imagine if you've got SteamOS powering a PC and you've downloaded a bunch of games onto a micro SD card. It'd be pretty easy just to eject that micro SD card and plug it into your Steam Deck. You take your Steam Deck on the road, you're off to the races. You don't have to worry about re-downloading all of those games. Anyways, here, that's a problem for another day because SteamOS hasn't released to the public. I'm very curious to see how the Legion Go S with SteamOS compares and competes against the Legion Go S with Windows. I'm assuming once that releases, we're going to see a whole lot of videos on that subject. Next up, if you're a fan of tool-assisted speedruns or you're just a fan of Bizhawk, Bizhawk just got a brand new update and added in some more cores. So at the time of filming, version 2.10 is the latest and greatest update. As for the new cores here, there's Encore for the 3DS, which is Citra. UAE for Amiga, Stella for Atari 2600, and Channel FHawk. Next up, if you're a fan of Bandai Namco and Capcom, specifically their retro games, you may be a fan of the new handheld that's just been announced by My Arcade. And this one is, well, it's looking pretty bulky, but looks pretty interesting. Oh, this is the Atari one that has the same form factor. So here's the right announcement. My Arcade announces Game Station Retro, including Bandai Namco and Capcom games. And it's got stuff in here like Final Fight and Street Fighter 2 and Pac-Man and even more. So here's a better look at the device. And if we take a look between this one and the Atari one, they do look extremely similar. I'm assuming the back end on these is the exact same, the same chipset, the same screen, and all of that. The control scheme is a little bit different on both devices, but overall I'd say probably, I'm assuming that they're going to be very similar. But taking a look here, speaking about controls being different, I'm surprised they went with a non-6 button control scheme, especially for Capcom games. Now, I could be wrong about this one, but I'm assuming they didn't go with 6 buttons here because they couldn't extend this because they are sharing components with the Atari one. Again, could be wrong. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter. This is going to be priced at $200. There's going to be over 100 games on it, and there are different versions. If you didn't want a handheld, they are coming out with a console. Console's set at $150. They're coming out with an arcade machine set at $300. A controller as well as an arcade stick. And speaking about arcade sticks and Capcom, next up we're talking about some brand new arcade machines that have just been announced by Iconic Arcades. These are powered by a Raspberry Pi 5, feature a bunch of Street Fighter games on them, and are larger than Arcade 1-Up. So based on my understanding, these are 9/10 scale replicas. They sit at about 67 inches tall and feature a 19-inch monitor. And as for games on them, they feature Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Hyper Street Fighter 2 The Anniversary Edition, Street Fighter Alpha, Alpha 2 and Alpha 3, Street Fighter Third Strike, Final Fight, Knights of the Round, 1944 Pro Gear, and Giga Wing 2. They are set to release June 2025, and pricing on these for pre-order is $699 USD with a retail price of $799. Let me know your thoughts about this one and if they're more attractive than something like Arcade 1-Up. Next up, if you're a fan of Game Awards and just can't seem to get enough of them, well, there's another Game Awards show here called the New York Game Awards 2025. And the nominees may not surprise you for Game of the Year. So here are the nominees. We've got College Football 25, Metaphor. On top of that, there's Indiana Jones, 1000X Resist, UFO 50, surprised to see that one on there, Astrobot, Final Fantasy VII, as well as Balatro. Now, I'm hoping here UFO 50 or Balatro win, but that's just me. And speaking about games that'll probably be nominated for Game of the Year, next up we're talking about Monster Hunter Wilds. If you're a fan of Monster Hunter, if you're looking forward to Monster Hunter Wilds, you'll be excited to know there's 2 more public beta tests. One is taking place from February 6th to 9th. And the other one is taking place from February 13th to the 16th. Now, if you missed those dates, you really don't have to worry. The game is releasing in February as well. It's releasing on February 28th. Next up, we're talking about ACER, and this one leaked a little while back, but has now been officially announced. ACER has announced 2 brand new gaming handhelds, the Nitro Blaze 8 and the Nitro Blaze 11. Both will feature an AMD Ryzen 7 8840HS processor with AMD Radeon 780M graphics. And interestingly here, the Blaze 8 features an 8.8-inch screen, and the 11 features a whopping 10.9-inch screen. So the 8.8-inch display on the Nitro Blaze 8 is at 144 Hz, and the 10.95, not 10.9, 10.95-inch display on the Nitro Blaze 11, that's massive. That one's at 120 Hz, so a little bit less. And they're both at 2560 by 1600 resolution, and they both feature 16 gigs of RAM. Not gonna lie here, I am very curious to hear your thoughts on these 2 handhelds. Are either of them attractive? Does the 11 make sense with the existence of the 8? I mean, the 8 has a higher refresh rate, they feature the exact same resolution, and the 8 is priced at $899 versus $1,099 for the 11. The internal specs are the exact same, so you're spending $200 extra for a bigger yet arguably inferior screen. And speaking about AMD, next up we're talking about the AMD Radeon RX 9070 GPU. I don't think NVIDIA is going to be happy with that name once they reach their 9th generation. Anyways, in yesterday's video we talked about the NVIDIA 5070, 5080, and 5090. And we talked about the pricing and performance, and a lot of people seem to be calling NVIDIA's bluff in terms of overall performance, saying those weren't true numbers, those were just inflated with DLSS. Now, if you remember in that video, and if you don't, feel free to go back to watch it, I'm not going to complain. In that video, I said I was very curious to see real-world numbers and real-world testing. I mean, sometimes they can be different from those marketing numbers. Anyways, here someone benchmarked the upcoming AMD Radeon RX 9070. And this one is very interesting if it's priced correctly. Now, it is worth mentioning that IGN's test here, I'll say test, is not necessarily, scientific or perfect, and it is prone to error, and it's not necessarily the most accurate thing out there. So more testing will be required, but they say here the performance of the 9700 will be very similar, or the 9070 will be very similar to the RTX 4080 Super, or possibly similar. So if NVIDIA or AMD prices the 9070, I'm already screwing them up because of the naming convention. If AMD prices the 9070 at a very reasonable price, I'm assuming some people may be interested in it. Truthfully though, take all of that with a massive grain of salt. I mean, it's very early drivers for the GPU. It's not real testing. But I am very curious to see real world numbers here and if the GPU can perform. I don't expect it to beat anything like the 5090 or possibly anything like that. But at the same time here, if the price is good and the performance is reasonable, I'm all about the price to performance ratio balance. I mean, the Intel Arc B580 I'm a big fan of because the price to performance seems very reasonable. And speaking about mixing stuff up because of the naming convention, next up we're talking about mixing something up because of the visual representation. Next up we're talking about Google, or are we talking about Bing? This is not Google, although it looks like it is Bing. If you take a look here, Microsoft Bing, but when you search for Google, it brings up this page. Not joking. Take a look at the search bar. And watch once I scroll down here and click refresh. It hides all of the Bing crap and makes it look like Google. This is a Bing search bar. This is not a Google search bar. Now, in my opinion, this is not a good look for Microsoft at all. I mean, it's being reported all over the place, and check out this headline over on The Verge. Microsoft is using Bing to trick people into thinking they're on Google. It's the latest attempt to get people to use Bing and Edge instead of Google and Chrome. Now, if you're naturally wondering how Google feels about all of this, they're not very happy. So Parisa, who is the browser boss over at Google Chrome, says, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but Microsoft spoofing the Google homepage is another tactic in its long history of tricks to confuse users and limit choice. New year, new low at Microsoft. Now, I don't know about you, but I find this absolutely hilarious. Do I agree with it? Absolutely not, but it is kind of funny. I mean, it is low, it's ridiculous, but at the same time, I can't believe that Microsoft actually did something like this. Next up, we're talking about OnePlus, and this is more of just a heads up here. So OnePlus unveiled the OnePlus 13 a couple of months back. We talked about it in previous videos. Anyways, here it's now available for sale, I think, worldwide. And taking a look, this one does have a Snapdragon 8 Elite chip in it, and there's two different versions, one with 12 gigs of RAM and one with 16. Now, looking at the internal storage here, and I'm a little bit disappointed there's not an option for 1 terabyte. There's two different options, 256 gigs and 512. 256 is paired with 12 gigs of RAM, and 512 is paired with 16 gigs of RAM. And taking a look here, if you are interested in pre-ordering, in Canada they're $12.50. In the States, I think they're $8.99 or $900. Now, if you are pre-ordering, it's probably worth doing that now as opposed to later, because you can pick up the 16 gig of RAM version for the exact same price as the 12 gig. So it wouldn't make sense to pre-order a 12 gig one at all, considering you get the free upgrade basically to 16 gigs and 512 gigs of storage. And speaking about hardware, last up here, we're talking about the new Razer Blade 16, and Razer has just unveiled this new laptop here, and they're going with AMD as the main processor. There's a lot of information in this article, and I do recommend checking it out if you wanted to learn more about the Razer Blade 16. But it will feature the AMD Ryzen AI9 processor, and it will feature an RTX 5090. So this thing will be a powerhouse in terms of overall computing ability, but it's also their thinnest ever. It's 1.50 centimeter profile, and that's awesome. But at the same time here, I'm very worried about fan noise. I mean, trying to keep a 5090 laptop GPU cool is probably going to be pretty tough. I'm very curious to see the fan profiles here when it is being tested out, when it's being pushed to its limits, and when people are gaming on it. I mean, having a thin profile with not a lot of room for air is probably going to have those fans screaming, but I could be wrong about that. Hopefully I'm wrong about that. Either way, here I'm just speaking from experience. I've got a thin laptop and I hate the fan noise. It drives me nuts. Maybe not for everybody else. It's a pet peeve of mine. So I'm hoping here that Razer has decided to figure out a way to really cool this down and implemented it. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Feel free to discuss anything we talked about in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.